So welcome back to the Universal Plywood channel, guys. This is part 4 of our 6-part series on how to turn plywood into some really decent looking furniture. Where we're at right now is we have done our cutting of our box joints for our sides of our big box, and this is what we call a dry assembly. Now, why do you want to do a dry assembly? It's a good idea to do it because it gets everything to just make sure that everything fits. You can remeasure things. If you need to tweak something, now's the time to do it before you start putting glue into the equation. Once I glue this, it's not going to come apart anytime soon. So what we've got here are our nice fitting finger joints. Look how sexy those corners look now. We're going to pull this whole thing apart, and what we have to do in this episode is do 2 things. We're going to make the grooves for our doors and glue up the box. Then we're going to turn our dowels out of our plywood little rods, and we're going to trim our doors to size and make sure that they fit into our box. Here comes the fun part. We've put it all together. Now we have to break it all apart again. It's like going backwards to go forwards. It's like, that is very frustrating, but it's worth it. You got to do it, because if you don't do it, it just ends up being a total mess. So sometimes it feels like you're going backwards, but you're going forwards. Just believe me. Dry assemblies are key. They're a good idea. Where's my technical adjuster? There it is. I call this a technical adjuster, not a hammer. And we're going to pull this whole box apart again. In fact, what is a good idea, let's do this now, is let's take our pencil and mark which panels go where, so that when we put it back together, we don't have to look around and try and work it out. So I'm going to mark these panels just across the corners here like that. And I'm going to make this number 1, and I'm going to make that number 1. I'll make this number 2, and that number 2, make this one number 3, 4, and 4. Okay, and I'm going to mark the top of each panel, and I'm going to X marks the spot for top, so that I don't get the orientation all messed up again, because it is very easy to get this wrong, believe me. Pencil can be sanded off, it can be rubbed out. You can do lots of cool things with pencil, and you don't have to worry about getting yourself into trouble. Okay, so here we go. We're knocking it back apart. Fantastic. 1 piece and 3 and 4. Right, in a second, we're going to work out where to put our grooves for our sliding doors. Let me just get this all reorientated. I'm going to clean up the insides a little bit. We'll come back and I'll show you guys where the lines have to be. Cool. What we're going to do now is we're going to set up to cut these grooves, and we're going to use this same setup on the table saw that you used. Because I've already got this, I can use this exact setup. Okay. Not to say that you have to. I can show you 2 ways to do this. I'm going to use the table saw, or I can just use a router to cut the grooves. Let's do 1 on the table saw, and then let's do 1 on the router. And then I'll show you guys the rabbets that we're going to cut to go in here, how that works. And let's use a router table for that as well. Or we can even just use this. In fact, let's use both. Why not? Let's show you all the options, shall we? So, how do we set up to cut this groove? Kind of simple. All we're going to do is use this exact same setup, because we know it's here. I'm actually going to use the pins itself to locate the blade. So I'm going to put the blade right over there. Now I'm going to push my fence up to it. There, that's just about perfect. Right, there we go. So that's great. Now I'm going to lower the blade, because I don't want to cut through my piece of wood. I'm going to lower it so that I just have enough of a groove to drop my doors into. There is my finger. There is my groove. Let's do a quick cut. Okay, so look at that. We've got a perfect groove now for our door to slide in. Let's do this one. We'll go to the router table, we'll set up, and I'll show you how to do this one on the router table. Remember, it's not critical that this is the same distance as that. What is critical is that that it is at least a little bit narrower than, it can be narrower than that, or as wide as, not wider than. So now we've got our groove over there, and it doesn't interfere with the actual pins, because it's hiding behind a full pin. So if you can see what I'm saying, if you look over there now, you can't see the groove because it's hiding behind a pin. And that's what you want to achieve. Remember, it's not important that it's the same width as the pin. It needs to be narrower than the pin so that it can hide in there naturally. Now, what do you do if you don't have a table saw with a dado blade? Well, if you have a table saw with a normal blade, you just do a couple of cuts. You just cut it, move it across 2 or 3 mils, cut it, move it across 2 or 3 mils. So it might take you an extra 1 minute. It's no big deal. People make too much of a deal out of finding excuses not to be able to do things. Oh, I can't cut deep grooves because I don't have a dado stack. Well, that's a load of rubbish. You can just do it with a single blade, a couple of repetitive cuts, and you're away. So it's not very difficult. And what you should do, if you can remember to do this, is cut, when you're doing your setups, cut your top and your bottom components together at the same time. So if you've got a single groove or like a dado stack, like now I should take my opposing part that sits up here and then cut it at the same time so that I know that those are directly above each other in the grand scheme of things. Okay? And if I'm doing single cuts with a single blade, then do one, do the other, move it along. Do one, do the other, move it along. That way you know that these two things will line up and your doors will be straight. Otherwise your doors will be skewed, which you don't want. So you want your doors to be straight. Let's say that you want to use a router to cut this groove. Well, that's not a problem. That's very, very easy to do. All you have to do is take your router, pop your fence on. So every router comes with this little fence over here. Pop him on, secure him nicely. And all you're going to do is use this groove to help you index where the bit's going to be. So I'm going to use my fence up against the side of it, and I'm going to use my second groove to index where that pin's going to be. So now it's easy for me to actually do it. Also, here's another pro tip. Have a look here. On the actual router itself, there's a line. That's the cool thing about these routers. There's a line. And that line denotes the middle of the actual bit itself. So I can tell, if I'm sitting way back here, I can tell that the middle of this line is in the middle of where I've marked, so I know that that's going to be perfect. All I have to do is keep this fence up against the side and then cut my groove. If you're nervous about being able to control this, or you're nervous about anything, I suggest you do a very shallow cut first. So I'm setting my bit incredibly shallow, just like 2 or 3 mils. We can always come back and make it deeper. I'm confident in my ability to hold this piece of wood straight and hold this up against there. What you can do is you can clamp this down, put it in a vise, do whatever it is you need to hold this piece of wood. If you feel you need 2 hands, I'm confident enough to hold this with one hand and my wood with the other, because it's easy enough to control. This router is not so powerful that it will rip things out of your hands. And we can see that our groove is in the perfect position. See there? All nice, good. So now I can increase the depth. I'm confident I'm going in the right place. I'm going to increase the depth and cut down to the same depth as this. So all I have to do here is release my collar on my router bit, drop it down, increase the depth, and we'll keep cutting. Here we go, nice and simple. I'm almost down to my final depth, so now I'm going to set it. I'm going to use this previous groove that I did with the saw blade to drop this down, release the collar, and tighten it up again. It's set itself now to the right height. I didn't have to try, measure, none of that stuff. I just used this groove to get that right. So all I'm going to do is just drop it down to the bottom. You can feel it just touch, tighten this up, and that's my correct depth. So let's do our final pass. And there you have it, a perfect groove all the way down at the same height and same thickness as the other groove over there. So for those of you who thought you can't turn plywood, guess what, you can. Check it out. From the table saw, and we've done our dry assembly. In the meantime, we've also cut these grooves at the back here. So these grooves are going to be the grooves in which our doors are going to fit. So more about that in the next episode. But for now, where we are is we've got our box dry assembled. We've got our dowels all turned and ready to cut to the right size. We have our grooves in the back, and all we have to do is cut our doors to size, fit them, and then just finish this thing. Glue it all together finally and give it a coat of finish and make it look very, very sexy. So if you haven't been around to see the first couple of episodes, go back and watch them, play catch up. If you're one of those people who like just watching the end of movies, well, then maybe part 6 is the one for you, because it all comes together in the next episode. So join us when we come back and put this thing to bed. Take it easy.